Hello, it's Feathered Lamb, and welcome to my first rewind video where I talk about old footage about old art. If you've seen my last video, you will know that this is the prequel sequel of it, which I did promise I would do. If you haven't watched it, my previous video was about my most recent two side profile studies. What I did not mention was that they were number 13 and 14 respectively. This video is a compilation of some of the side profile studies I did at the beginning of 2022. I don't have footage of all my studies, but luckily I do have the first one, so we can properly compare where I started to where I am now. How did I even stumble upon doing this specific type of study? Okay, so picture it. Chicago 2022, an artist is perusing Pinterest and is captured by Barbra Streisand's picture. They decide to draw her and discover it's not only horrendous, but looks nothing like the poor woman. And that's when I see with actual proof that I suck. And the only way to unsuck is to study side profiles and how to make the proportions and placements look cohesive together. How did I get better and how long did it take though? By study number 6, the likeness of the subject was showing. The fruit of my labor was paying off. And this took 6 days. In other words, a study per day, which means that I improved by being consistent in what I wanted to improve at. I was very clear with myself. I was not going to analyze or deconstruct anything else. Instead, I was going to put all my mental capacity and focus on one thing, side profiles. And that's all I did for 10 days straight. Study number 11 and up, I did sporadically to retain what I improved on those initial 10 days. The only hiccup was study number 7. By this study, I noticed I wasn't very happy with how I rendered hair, which is why this is technically a side profile, but where's the face though? In general, I was neutral with how it turned out. My biggest problem with hair isn't updos or hairstyles anyway, it's loose hair. I don't know if it's accurate or my over self-criticizing self, but my rendering reminds me of Barbie movies, where the hair is one big solid lump of mass. Regardless, there still is some face, and it's definitely an angle I hadn't done before, so I didn't veer too far from the main point, and technically I can still call this a side profile. Study number 8 was easy, fast. I didn't have trouble with the proportions, and I even liked how the hair turned out. This means I found myself in a little bit of a stalemate. So I decided to engage my brain a little bit more to challenge myself. Which brings me to study number 9. This study was a little tricky because of the angle. Not only is this a side profile, but the face is also tilted upwards. I find upward angles a little awkward to draw. They're fine when you're looking at a picture or at someone in person. But when you draw them, they always look a little off. I definitely need to practice this angle more, not just in side profiles, but even in head-on upward angles too. Study 10 is an older gentleman. 2 things I don't draw much of. What I have found with children and older people alike is to choose your lines wisely. Pick what is important to draw and what you can omit. It's like drawing teeth. When you draw all the lines, it moves into creepy, uncanny valley. Not all lines are important to include, only those that are necessary to properly represent what you are drawing. This advice, however, might not be relevant for a hyper-realistic style, but if you have one similar to the one I'm drawing in here or an anime cartoonish style, definitely keep this in mind. March morphs into November, a whole 8 months pass. A lot has happened. I found my footing with Clip Studio, and I'm actively in a transitional era between art styles, as you can see from the footage. Notably, it's a little more realistic and my shadows have a warmer hue, which will, spoilers, eventually transform into red. And I cannot move on without mentioning that yes, surprise, it's another man. There will be no more going forward, I must say. And then June of 2023 flew in, and I noticed I'm getting a little rusty, and that simply won't do. Don't get me wrong, the study isn't horrible, nowhere near poor butchered Barbara, that's for sure. But I was definitely not putting in the care or focus into the study, and it shows through, at least for me. Even the coloring of it, I was unhappy with. So I decided to truly take some time, refresh what I had learned, and focus on the study I was doing. Which leads us to study 13 and 14, my previous video, which will be in the end card. Because I was disappointed about the coloring of study 12, I decided to make these in black and white. This way I could focus fully on the side profiles and the skill of it all without worrying about the rendering process. This will also allow me to properly judge without letting the color skew my opinion about the finished product. Because at the end of the day, the priority of these studies is my improvement of side profiles. I can't allow my opinion to be colored, pun intended, by how unhappy I am with the colors. Hello, it's Feathered Lamb again, and this is actually my most recent side profile study. After I did number 13 and 14 and then published a video about them, I did another one. This one, specifically so I could tackle colors again. Honestly, I think despite how confused I was with 12 at the beginning, retroactively, I know what happened. I mean, the previous one, number 11, was in November and 12 was in June, so a lot of months passed by. It would be as expected even if the skills truly left me. But that's not what happened. When I was working on number 12, I really was trying to rush the process, so I'm not surprised I hindered my own rustiness. By being disinterested, I set my actual skills back. I created my own reality, and it was a self-fulfilling prophecy of mediocrity. 13 is simply so much better to just chalk it all up to lack of practice. And it's because I was having fun. Despite 11 and 12 being months apart, it's 12 and 15 that look eons apart when it was only a few days in between. Truly, your attitude matters. I talked about this a little in Yoongi's video, which I'll also add to the end card. But if you do something with malagana, meaning with a bad attitude, it simply won't turn out well. Because you're not putting in the attention, the focus, and the interest you should. Why? Because you don't care to do it well. You don't care to do it at all. And the product will suffer for it. The disinterest will show. Number 15, however, was done with goodwill. And I think that's pretty clear to see. Number 12 is finished, technically, because I said I'm done. I could have kept going. I could have tried to improve something, but I didn't want to, so I didn't. After some time though, I looked at it and thought, you know what, let's try that again, with a little more enthusiasm this time. And we end up with number 15. It really turned out great, if I'm so humble as to say so myself. I mean, I have to admit, the scarf, immaculate. I'm sorry, but it's true. I've never drawn a more beautiful crisp piece of cloth before. I don't know how it happened, but I'm patting myself in the back with this one. And it's this scarf that really shows how unfinished number 12 is. The scarf in 12 is a stripe of color with a bit of variation, and I called it a day. Number 15's though has a pattern and everything. The true improvement, however, is the gap between poor Barbara and this last site study. It's wild to see how much evolution there is, not just in my understanding of side profiles, but even my own style, which wasn't part of the plan, but happened along the way anyway. It's to be expected. A whole year has passed, but it's still impressive that so much could change so quickly. I would definitely advise in art studies. I know everyone says it all the time, but I do think it's key. Studies really do make you improve, and at a faster rate if you're consistent and do it with good will. I do think that what is most important is to take it one step at a time by slowly focusing on one thing. It's overwhelming and difficult to try to learn everything at once. Everyone always says, learn the basics, anatomy, lighting, but that's too much to do at the same time. It's best to pick one thing and do that one thing to really soak up and have an understanding of what you're doing. Furthermore, you're more likely to have malagana if you're training yourself to learn too many things at once that you are barely soaking in. Drawing is a skill, and like any other skill, you have to do it consistently to learn, and then keep doing it so your brain doesn't forget. How many of us have forgotten information we learned in school because we don't use it again? Yeah. The brain simply throws it away to make space for much more important things, and the only way it knows is important is if you keep tapping on that information. Specifically, if you keep tapping on that information with a good attitude. The brain also doesn't want to remember anything you learn when you tell it you don't care for it. Hope you enjoyed a little trip from the start of my studies to where I'm at now, and hopefully anything I said in this video was helpful for you. Thank you for tuning in. Click on the white subscribe button down below. You will know when you're subscribed when it turns from white to gray. Have a magical day.